Welcome to the Business of Story, where we connect you with the leading minds in the art of business storytelling. Learn from best-selling authors, Hollywood screenwriters, makers, content marketers, and brand raconteurs on how to craft and sell compelling stories that sell. The Business of Story is brought to you by Emma, which provides innovative email marketing tools and services that drive brilliant results. And by Convince and Convert, digital marketing advisors and counselors to leading brands and organizations worldwide. Convince and Convert helps you gain and keep your customers online. Here's your host, Park Howell.
Hello, welcome back to Business of Story. Park Howell here with you today. And we've got another story artist for you, but today we are going to be focusing on visual storytelling. Now, most of our guests have come from screenwriting, authors, content marketers, brand raconteurs. And it wasn't until, I guess, in late April, early May that we featured our first visual storytelling artist, and that was Doug Drexler. Academy Award-winning Doug Drexler, who's a visual effects artist, designer, and illustrator. He won his Oscar for his work on the Dick Tracy movie and the amazing costumes and makeup that he did there on that crew. He's also done a ton of work with Battlestar Galactica, Star Trek, and is a very highly decorated Hollywood visual artist, visual storyteller. If you have not heard that episode, go check it out. Doug Drexler was really fascinating, fun guy to talk with too. And today we have another visual storytelling artist, and this is a gentleman that comes from the photography background. Studied at some really great schools, published a photography magazine that he will talk a little bit more about, and now hailing out of the Bay Area, has a really cool platform at Fabl.co, Fabl.co. So if you're not on a treadmill, if you're not out mowing the lawn, if you're not out running, walking, driving, listening to Business of Story, if you happen to be in front of your computer, you might want to pull up Fabl.co as we talk through the platform and the program today. And today's guest is Taj Forer. He's really fascinating, and we are going to dive deep into the power of visual storytelling. And to me, it's a personal thing I really dig. I'm sort of this makeshift, make-believe street photographer. I love to just go out and capture stuff as it's happening in front of me. And sometimes I luck out and get really amazing shots, and people go, "Oh my God, you're such a good photographer." And yet I'm not, because I literally just point and shoot. I have my iPhone or I have my other camera. I don't think a lot about it. And today's show, I learn really the importance of thinking about the lighting around that. But I'm looking for the action that's going on, and I click it, and sometimes I get really lucky. Maybe you have that same experience when you take a shot and you look down at your iPhone or whatever camera you might be using, and you're going, "Oh my goodness, that's like a gift. That is like a beautiful shot. This doesn't even require any filters. I could post on Instagram immediately." That's why I'm so excited about today's show, because I get to learn about the power of visual storytelling and how we can use our own eyes and minds and little equipment that is so amazing to go out and capture really terrific images that we can use for our own personal branding or for working on behalf of our clients. If you've ever been to my Instagram account, please go there if you haven't, and friend me if you would, follow, because I'm always sharing my photography, whether good, bad, or indifferent. Love to get your opinion on it, but also photography of others that really stand out. Plus, I get to have a lot of fun promoting Business of Story in different unusual ways using the power of visual storytelling. And to me, that is finding that right image with just that right line, that right headline, that then brings it all together when you look at the logo and you get this aha moment. To me, that is like about the most powerful advertising marketing you can do. And in today's attention deficit economy, we have to be top of mind. We have to be showing our audiences images that stop them, that arrest them, that get them thinking, that get those synapses firing, to connect the dots, that gets them involved in our story. And all of a sudden they get that warm, comfortable wrap around them of our brand that says, "Wow, Thank you for inviting me into your story. Thank you for not overthinking this for me. Thank you for letting me have some fun with the imagery and how you go about your visual storytelling to get them involved in the story. So that's what we're doing today. And before we jump into the show, also would like to invite you over to businessofstory.com. There you can download tools, a workbook, a new whole interactive workbook that you can work right within the PDF that also has a video tutorial that goes along with each of the 10 chapters, 10 steps of the story cycle process so that you can use it to help get your brand story strategy straight, to grow your enterprise and to grow your people. That's at businessofstory.com. Plus, I've got a survey there. I would love to know what's working for you in the business story realm and where are your pain points. Share with me your pain points there, and I promise you, I will find content and share that with you. I will find story artists for this show and share that with you because I want to make sure you're getting as much value, if not more value, out of this program than what I can possibly put in. So test me, text me, let me know what works for you, what doesn't work for you, and how can I get you better content moving forward. And then finally, I want to let you know that the American Marketing Association has hired me for yet another workshop. We did a 2-day brand story strategy workshop with a Business of Story platform in Chicago in April, and we just had a blast. We had 11 different companies represented there, went through the 2-day session to help people understand why story is more important now than ever to rise above the noise of the attention economy, show you this proven 10-step process to storytelling we call the story cycle, apply it to your leadership story so that you are leading into writing and crafting stories that you can live into and profit from. And of course, then wrapping that around your brand and making sure that your brand is expressing that same story in all you do for your people, for your customers, for your investors. It's just a matter of getting your brand story straight. We will do that on November 3rd and 4th. No, I'm sorry. It's November 2nd and 3rd. Don't take my word for it. Go to the website. That's what you need to do. It's ama.org/brand story. Or look in the show notes here, ama.org/brand story. It's in Washington, D.C., the first part of November 2nd and 3rd, and I would love to have you in attendance for that program, and I'll take you through the entire story cycle process as brought to you through the Business of Story. And by the way, if you're listening to this show next year, this is 2016. So if you missed it, hopefully we've got another one going on after November somewhere else we can tell you about. All right. Without further ado, let's jump in today's Business of Story episode with Taj Forer. Hey, Taj, man, it's great to have you here on Business of Story. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Park.
Well, as you know, we've been doing this show for over a year now, and we've been finding story artists all around the world. And so many of them are authors and writers, really working on the narrative side. It's great having you here on the show today because you come very much from the visual storytelling side. Or am I making too much of an assumption here?
No, you're absolutely right. I am guilty as charged. Started my career as a photographer, actually. Working in the visual arts, and then that led me to some visual media-based publishing work, which led to developing some software to make digital experiences of visually based content better. And now that's what I do with most of my time is run a cloud software company for brands telling stories that are rooted in visual media. So you're absolutely right.
All right. We'll get to that in a minute. Give us a little bit more of a background about yourself, because I've been on your site. You've got some beautiful photography. So first and foremost, were you a professional photographer?
I was, yep. So by way of background, I started studying photography actually, I really started in high school, to be honest. I found an old Nikon Nickermat 35 millimeter press camera in the basement of my parents' house. It's kind of a classic story. And I remember bringing it upstairs and asking my parents, where it had come from. And it turned out that my dad had a brief stint in his earlier life as a working photographer, kind of self-taught, and still had some equipment. And he said, "Yeah, if you'd like, we'll go to the store and get some film, and you're welcome to play around with that thing." And so, sure enough, we did. We drove to a local camera shop and got some film. And when those first pictures came back from the lab, I was pretty much hooked. So I went on to study photography as an undergrad, and then in graduate school as well, pursuing an MFA. And I was a working photographer, predominantly focused on kind of long-form storytelling through photography, subject matter rooted in the real world, kind of human-based stories, but with an overtly aestheticized and kind of formal visual emphasis, functioning primarily within the gallery world, the art world. I did some assignment work for a while. There were a couple books of my work published, and that's what really got me interested in, not only telling visual stories of my own, but also, helping others to tell their own visual stories. So kind of an organic evolution, I suppose.
Long form story in photography. What is that? How does that work?
Yeah, so in a lot of the instances wherein we're exposed to photography, it's very short form, and what I mean there is either a singular image or perhaps a couple few images that illustrate an article in a magazine. The emphasis really being on the text, the quote long form narrative being text based or written, and what I was interested in was these bodies of photographic works that are in and of themselves the story. And consist of dozens of images and kind of cohesively develop in many instances a much more kind of profound visceral reaction to the narrative that's being explored. When compared to the written article, and so I was always kind of interested in better understanding the limitations that led, from a publishing perspective and editorial perspective, the limitations that led to these very kind of minimally presented bodies of photographs, and doing what I could with my own work as well as through my own publishing work of other photographers to kind of explode those norms and to create forums for my own work and the work of others that was photographically based to exist in these longer formats. So that's what I mean by that.
And are these images meant to really stand on their own without a lot of text or without any text around them, that someone could flip through the pictures and really get a sense of the story, but all told visually?
That's a great question. This is a hot topic in the visual arts, is the relationship between text and image, and there are different theories on that. Some believe that the singular image or the group of images ought to be strong enough to carry the narrative on their own, while others feel very strongly that some text-based narrative or supplement a caption and introduction is vital to kind of set the viewer off on the right track, and then the photographs can really speak for themselves thereafter. I don't really subscribe to either camp, wholeheartedly. I don't think it's that polemic. I definitely am a firm believer in a successful image, representing the possibility of containing all of the content, all of the narrative or the story, that one seeks to communicate through their image. But there are different different contexts and different I think opportunities to engage text. So it really just depends on sort of circumstance and perhaps how kind of obscure the imagery might be or the subject matter of the imagery. I kind of take things project by project, I would say.
You studied at Sarah Lawrence College, right? Got your undergrad there?
I did. Yep. I studied there. There's a great American photographer named Joel Sternfeld, who is quite iconic and is in most of the photo history books. And he headed the photography department there. And when I learned that, and I was kind of getting serious about my practice, I saw that as a great opportunity to study with one of the living masters. And was fortunate to get accepted into the program, and I now have a 20-year relationship, working with Joel as a mentor and friend and teacher. So I had a phenomenal experience there.
Well, you must be doing something right. I guess some of your work is at J. Paul Getty Museum in L.A., the North Carolina Museum of Art, and even Sir Elton John Museum, which I didn't know there was one in London.
Yeah. I don't know how formal his collection is from a public perspective, but he is a prolific collector of art and most specifically photography-based art. He had come across some of my work in a gallery and bought it. So I've never met the guy, but it's kind of funny to think about one of my pictures hanging in his house.
Absolutely. I want to go back to Sarah Lawrence College for a moment because, another well-renowned American mythologist, Joseph Campbell, taught there for many, many years until his death in 1987. And I'm curious because so much of our work is based off of, the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell's work. When you were studying there, was that infused in any way, shape, or form in your work? Was his, legacy, lore still hanging around the campus?
Yeah, I love that you're one who knows Joseph Campbell and his work, and I know that about you. So I appreciate you bringing that up. Yeah, Joseph Campbell had retired by the time I was studying at Sarah Lawrence, but his legacy certainly lived on. And one of the coolest experiences I had was discovering his work somewhat independently of the curriculum at Sarah Lawrence. I was quite interested in philosophy and sort of the history of storytelling and the anthropology, associated with storytelling. And a lot of my independent kind of seeking and research, being at a very progressive liberal arts school, led me to my own discovery, as well as those presented by faculty. And I found, the collected works of Joseph Campbell, and I had heard that he used to be, a tenured faculty member at Sarah Lawrence. And in the center of campus, I guess what most schools would refer to as the quad, there was this little old, somewhat, perhaps Asian-influenced tea house. And I knew it as the tea house. It was a place that was student run. You could go get a cup of coffee, get a cup of tea, kind of a cool, neat environment, a lot of glass. And it was quite close to my my room on campus, and I would often go there. Well, I learned that was Joseph Campbell's office, and so suddenly when my sort of understanding of his work and my admiration for much of his writing and teaching, and of course I had watched the incredible documentary series produced, around his work and his most famous book. Being in that space took on a new meaning, and there was this kind of added profundity to sitting there and having a cup of coffee. But yeah, very much so. His work, touched the lives of many faculty members who are still there, and I think that his influence, certainly made its way to me and my work somehow, albeit less formally than the classroom setting. Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm a very much of an amateur photographer, but I love it. And I particularly like street photography, running around, and when something just presents itself, pulling up my iPhone or whatever camera I might have on me at the time. And sometimes I get lucky, and a lot of times I don't, but it's really amazing when you can just capture that image that tells a story in and of itself, whether there are people in it or not. And I'm wondering, because imagery is so important in this day and age to get through through, to cut through the clutter online. It seems like everybody is really talking about you've got to have that powerful image. What goes into telling a story in a single frame? What do you look for? What can you guide? How can you guide us amateurs to try to capture that moment, that slice of life that tells a story, and then something we could be using for our brands moving forward?
Yeah, that's a big one, Park.
Totally is, I know.
But no, I love it though. And I wouldn't say that there's a single answer. I mean, honestly, the first thing that came to mind is so obvious that it's almost not worth stating, but I'll say it anyway. It's paying attention to the light, and the etymology of the word photography, photo, light. Graphy, writing, light writing. And I think now, relative to the ubiquity of relatively decent cameras, right? Like look at the iPhone 6, for instance. Apple is running the majority of their global marketing campaigns with imagery produced by consumers on that device. I think that kind of speaks for itself. Mm-hmm. We often forget to really pay attention to the primary driver of a, quote, successful photograph, which is the quality of the light that we're capturing, the quality of the light that we are writing with, so to speak. And so, I think what sets an image that has more depth and more meaning apart from one that doesn't, wherein these two images are hypothetically depicting the same subject matter. Take encountering, someone sitting on the steps of a building when you're walking to get your morning coffee in town. If there's a streak of light, that's coming in and bouncing off of a metallic surface and illuminating that person's face, and you make that image, versus the moment that the cloud coverage has obscured that light, and you make the same image. They're arguably, from an informational or a kind of fundamental narrative perspective, they're communicating much the same thing, but likely the first image that has that beautiful reflected, diffused light that illuminates the face is going to deepen and richen and enliven and perhaps even charge emotionally the way that we read the image. And so, really paying attention to the way that light is behaving within the frame and interacting with the primary subject of the picture, I think is something that is so often overlooked by amateur photographers, the average photographer, who is kind of, in this wanderlust, mentality, and they see something that's neat and they snap away, rather than seeing something that's neat that draws their eye and then waiting a minute and looking at, the cloud coverage and seeing what's going to happen, over the next, 30 seconds to 3 minutes, if they've got the time to kind of hang out until the light shifts and then snap the image. It's just amazing how much more of an impact a photograph can have when there's true sensitivity and awareness of the way that the light will interact with the subject. So that's probably the broadest but most kind of profound facet of photography that I think leads to one image being more successful than another.
So it's interesting. The context of the image or the setting is what first captures our eye. We see something interesting, and I suppose we even sort of frame it up in our mind, but sometimes we fire off that shot until we allow the light to get just right, if indeed it is going to change. So we have to have that sensitivity, because it sounds like that's even more important than the setting, than what you're capturing.
Yeah, I mean, it can be. I used to teach photography. I taught photography at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and then at City College in New York. And one of the things that that I would often tell students is, the worst time for editing your photographs is when you're out shooting. So, I say that relative to your comment because, I hate to sort of cut off the impulse to make images when one is out in the world making images, shooting photos. But at the same time, yes, you're in a way you're right. An image can really fall on its face if it was shot in terrible light, and arguably, that image may be unusable. Having said it, there are certain contexts for, any image being extremely important to present. Like, I don't know, we look at the horrific, news these days surrounding all of the, police violence that is being documented. And it's not that the police violence, against people of color is new. It's that our ability to capture and disseminate those images are new. And are those images very important and, in fact, shaping political and social dialogue and history today? Absolutely. Are they technically, formally, beautiful images that represent awareness of light in that decisive moment, as, Cartier-Bresson would suggest? Likely not, but they're still very successful images. So I think a lot of that conversation relates to context as well and sort of the purpose of the imagery. But as far as art photography is concerned, when one is sort of functioning as a visual storyteller with the luxury to wait around for the light and to make an image that much more impactful than another by shifting to a different angle or hanging out until the diffused cloud coverage filters the light just so, by all means it's going to afford huge benefits to the resulting photograph.
So I got to ask you the question then about filters. Is that cheating or what? Because I am just amazed when you can snap off a shot with an iPhone 6 and it looks pretty good. And then, of course, you can go through Ludwig, the different filters, right, and you can really make it look amazing. And I've also found when I've captured a shot where the lighting isn't spectacular, isn't really working, all I got to do is go to a black and white filter, and it just seems to bring this richness out. And I got to tell you, Ansel Adams must be rolling over in his grave because it just seems like it's too easy for us. But in a lot of ways, that's so cool, the democratization of capturing some really neat imagery that we can be using in our communications.
Yeah. No, it's kind of a confusing time, I think, for a lot of formally trained photographers, particularly those of my generation and older. I mean, I'm on the cusp of the analog digital divide. I was formally trained using solely analog photography. Of course, I adapted to digital. I still have a Hasselblad. I still shoot 120 millimeter film, but I also, have a Canon 5D Mark II and shoot digital. But as far as the filters and the access to filters are concerned, I don't really see it as cheating or as problematic, because ultimately, photographers have always sought to engage the best tools possible. I mean, you probably remember, on lens filters when you're shooting, 35 millimeter film, be it infrared or not. There was always the filter set that a photographer, a serious amateur, hobbyist, or a professional, carried around, and many still do. Digital filtration, certainly achieves, very similar thing in the resulting end image. And I love that photographic technology, so to speak, has become so accessible, because I certainly enjoy looking at images that are, being distributed through social media and adopted by brands, product marketers, far more when the images are, considered and aestheticized, perhaps not too overtly, but, they're representative of someone paying attention and trying to make the best damn image they can, and I love that those tools are now literally at our fingertips. So yeah, I'm kind of a fan of all of these great technological advances that have made image processing, image manipulation more accessible to more people.
And then final question before we get into talking about Fabl, because it's a really interesting platform that you and your team have built to help people with their visual and narrative storytelling. How can people, again, regular folks like us, go out and use our iPhone 6 to capture images that we can be using on Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, other places online to help further our brand storytelling? It just seems to me, I finally gave myself permission to do it instead of always having to go on, look for stock photography and whatever. And again, these aren't going to be in big spreads. Magazines are not going to be on billboards, but I found and have gotten a lot of use out of my own photography, just adding a brand to it, be it business of story or whatever, wrapping a story around it, the way the headline interacts with the imagery to get people to think. But I have had so much fun sort of hacking the photography world, I guess, in my own way by simply shooting my own things in my little phone and putting it up. And I get a lot of response to them. It's been a lot of fun. Are you seeing a growth in that? And how, coach me or coach others like me, how can we be doing a better job with that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, there's just more and more photography and video, being produced every day, it seems. And the majority of that is certainly coming from consumers, right? Like you and me, just people who have an iPhone in their pocket, have an interest in photography, and choose to kind of document the world as we exist within it and move through it and experience it. And so I think more than anything, it's really about sort of a shift in perception, a shift in mentality surrounding the inherent value of user-generated content. When we kind of transition the conversation to, brand and product marketing, particularly in digital, it's really about, understanding that there's an extremely valuable resource that we can, in fact, harvest as marketers in user-generated content, or, for, the small mom and pop shop, or, the independent entrepreneur, there's let's say, don't overlook, the immediacy and quality of the imagery that might be produced by yourself or, your small team members, because there really is just an incredible advantage today that many marketers didn't have, even 10 years ago, really, when we look at the relative ease with which we can produce really high quality imagery. So yeah, I am no stranger to using user generated content, to using team member photography for blog posts or social media posts, and then using content produced by users or customers as well. In fact, not only is it just practically speaking, a great strategy for sourcing, engaging imagery at no cost or very low cost, but in fact, when anyone sees one of their images, online somewhere, inevitably it feels good, and we want to project that. And so I think there's a lot to be said for kind of the social momentum that can be built around harnessing the work of the everyman, the every woman, photographically speaking.
Well, yeah, and I think there's a real authenticity to it too. Providing it's a quality shot and it's really working with the piece, but there's a lot of authenticity that comes out of it when the brand is generating its own work, whether that's a solopreneur, entrepreneur working for a startup, or even a large organization who have sort of unleashed their folks to go out and capture their own imagery and use that in the storytelling of the brand. I found really powerful. Mm-hmm. I was in London, Liverpool, actually. I flew into London and I took a train up to Liverpool for some business of story sessions with my good friend Brian Adams of PH Creative out in Liverpool. And I was just coming in the station. Now, this again, I had flown all night, left Phoenix, got into London, took the train downtown to catch the next train. On that for 3.5 hours. I was pretty exhausted by the time I rolled into Liverpool. But as I was coming in, we were slowing down into the station. A drizzle was coming down. And it was a Sunday afternoon, so it wasn't a very crowded train. I was kind of sitting there by myself, and I thought, wow, this is sort of that kind of romantic. There must be a song in here or something as I'm rolling in. And as we're coming in, a train is just pulling out going the other direction. So we're slowing down. It's just starting to pick up the pace. And I see several windows down coming at me in that train, this little tow-headed boy. And he must have been, I don't know, 8 or 9. Mm-hmm. And he had his head rested against the window looking out and his hand up pressed against the window right above his forehead. In the background was this dark, imposing figure. All you could see was a silhouette of him, and it could have been his dad or something. For some reason, I just thought uncle. I don't know why, but he was. You just saw the silhouette, and then these bright colors. It's turquoise and a light purple swash that went across this train. And I just picked up my iPhone 6 very quickly and just got one image, one picture as he was going by in the opposite direction. And there was something about that image that is so haunting. In fact, I'll include it in the post when we're promoting this particular podcast. It's so haunting looking through that window. I got this completely natural filter of the rain that had come down, dripping down the side of the window, and then just a little bit of movement in there that it created this most amazing watercolor Monet-esque haunting picture of this little boy on this train going somewhere. And it's one of those times when I looked at it and it actually kind of gave me shivers. When I looked at it, I go, ooh, it was almost like I just captured this moment, this slice in time with that one image. I haven't used it yet in any of my work, but it's one of those moments that I found that old saying of F8 and be there. Mm-hmm. I'm a big believer in that, F8, I guess that's the camera stop that is pretty much universal. If you're set to F8, chances are us amateurs are going to get a good pick, but then be there, just be on the ready for that moment when it happens. And I'll send you that shot after this because I still think about it. It's just one of those things, just happened to catch it at the right time, no filter on it. And it's just this beautiful slice of time.
Love it. So, I love that story, Park, and I look forward to seeing the image. And I just wanted to kind of unpack what happened in the last, minute and a half, because I was completely suspended. I know I'm a visual person, but I don't think you need to be a visual person to understand what Park just did for, all of us who are or were listening. I was there with you and I was seeing what you were seeing through your description of the image. And you talked about, then making that photograph and when you looked at it, you felt chills. And the I think the reason that I am so obsessed with visual storytelling is because we can actually feel something. It becomes visceral. The experience of the world through a successful image elicits a physical or an emotional response in the viewer. And to me, that's just pure magic. And when, a brand or, a marketer understands that, and leverages that visceral power of visual media, of visual storytelling, really incredible things start to happen because their audience, the viewer, the consumer group, is physically moved. And when we have a physical reaction, there's arguably nothing more kind of defining or impactful as a human being, as having, an emotion stir, a physical reaction. And, I was just there with you seeing that and then, even experiencing the resulting image through your, just telling me about it, so I can only imagine seeing the image itself, would likely, even, further heighten those feelings. So, I appreciate the story and I appreciate the illustration of, kind of the point.
Absolutely.
Drop the mic moment.
Well, thank you for that. Tell you what, we're going to drop the mic here for just a moment because we have some stories from our sponsors that we would like to share. And when we come back, Taj, I want to have you share with us this new platform that you guys have created called Fabl, F-A-B-L, at fabl.co, fabl.co. It's really fascinating how you have taken visual storytelling, wrapped it in, round narrative, really, so they're kissing cousins, if you will, and have created some amazing brand stories. So let's talk about Fabl right after these messages from our sponsors. Hey, if you like what you're hearing here on Business of Story, then you are going to love Definitive, the email from Convince and Convert that many marketers say is the most useful resource around. Each day, the team at Convince and Convert picks a topic and sends you the 3 best resources ever created about that topic. It's topical, it's timely, it's useful, so go to definitivedigest.com and subscribe for free right now. Hey, I've got a question for you. What's the best call to action button color on your website? Yeah, you probably didn't see that one coming, did you? Well, what's the best shape and sizes of your CTA buttons? And what copy gets more clicks? These questions have interrupted my sleep patterns for weeks now, until I downloaded a helpful new email marketing guide from Emma called Why We Click: The Psychology Behind a Great Call to Action. You'll learn how applying just a little bit of brain science can transform your CTA buttons into small but mighty conversion powerhouses. It covers the button color, copy, and placement that helps skyrocket click rates. Check it out at myemma.com/click. Emma helps marketers everywhere send smart, stylish email newsletters, promotions, and automated campaigns, and help us all rest a little easier knowing our email marketing is doing its job. So check out their new publication at myemma.com/click. Welcome back to Business of Story, and our guest today, Taj Forer, an amazing photographer and author of 2 highly acclaimed books on photography or imagery, and the founder, creator with his team of a really interesting new brand storytelling platform called Fabl, F-A-B-L. Taj, tell us a little bit give us the backstory, if you would. Where did Fabl come from, and what are you all trying to do with it?
Yeah, sure. So it really begins, as I think as many startups do, it begins in the college dorm room at Sarah Lawrence, where, as we chatted earlier, I studied photography as an undergrad, and I had the pleasure of meeting another young photographer named Michael Itkoff, and together we, as kind of rising seniors, were interested in getting our work out into the world. And we were really close to New York City. Sarah Lawrence is just up kind of in the Yonkers, Westchester area off of the Metro North train line. So, New York, the gallery scene, the museums were a big part of our, weekly existence as, aspiring visual artists. And we wanted to get our work exhibited and published. And through conversation with Michael, we began sharing the frustrations that we experienced, associated with trying to get our work, published or exhibited, let alone even looked at by some authority figure in the photography and art community. And those conversations really led to, I think, a collective understanding that everyone in our shoes experienced the same frustrations and the same challenges. It was a very difficult kind of market to break into, as a young person, and so we decided that we would publish our own work together, and maybe if we produced a really high quality, offset printed, book, if you will, that we might be able to differentiate ourselves from the dearth of young artists trying to get their work promoted. And as we talked more, we had a kind of beautiful moment of altruism, I guess, and we decided to can the idea of pushing our own work, and in fact try to create a new platform, a new voice in the art and photography community through the creation of a print magazine, and we would do this, as a real support mechanism for emerging and younger photographers, and we decided that we would bring readership to the publication by publishing the work by some marquee, name artists, and then always include the work of some younger emerging artists, such that we might bring an informed readership to discover their work. And so we started this magazine. It was called Daylight Magazine. And in 2003, we published the first issue of the magazine. We scraped together funding. This is, before print on demand. So everything was, very high production standards, offset, 4-color printing. And we were pretty quickly accepted. I mean, we did this kind of guerrilla marketing thing where I remember, walking through New York and Brooklyn with backpacks full of magazines and taking stacks into bookstores and museum shops and, asking them if they would, sell them, sort of on consignment. And they were like, who the hell are these kids? What are they thinking? But wow, this is beautiful. Sure, we'll take 5 or we'll take 10. And before we knew it, we had sold out the first print run. And we kind of got the funds together to print a second issue. And before we knew it, we were kind of rolling, and the magazine really filled kind of an interesting hole in the photography market at the time. We did have just a bit of an innate sense for visual editing, and that came through in our kind of curatorial and design work. I was designing the magazine myself. Using some antiquated design software, had no clue what I was doing, but we made it work, and we eventually achieved domestic and then global distribution contract for Daylight Magazine, and increasingly we began we began becoming more interested in what I spoke to earlier, namely the limitations of the magazine format as compared to the deep long form storytelling that many photographers that we were interested in promoting were in fact producing. And then we would need to distill, these, 5-10 year bodies of work into a 6-page spread. And it just felt like such a letdown and a disservice. So we were always pushing for longer form presentation. And that led us to decide that we would take a stab at publishing books, particularly monographs, the single body of work by a single photographer. And we published our first book, and it did quite well. And that led to a second and a third and a fourth. And before we knew it, we were a book publishing company. And we had global distribution for the books, and then we started thinking about, wow, so how do we kind of break out of this niche category of fine art, albeit a very influential kind of top of the pyramid, so to speak, market. We were always thinking more democratically and thinking about broader audiences, and we're entrepreneurs, right? So we recognized that digital was the place that we could prospectively begin to really expand audiences beyond the ceiling that we were kind of hitting in the physical, art and photography book market. And so we began producing multimedia content, kind of narrated, slideshows, first person, narrative, wherein the photographer would tell the stories behind their images, and we could present, 20 or 30, photographs. And we did some syndication around that with other global media companies. But we always felt like somehow the format of digital presentation wasn't what it should be, wasn't where we wanted it to be, as image makers as well as publishers and media guys. And so we started experimenting in... it was probably 2011 thereabouts. We started experimenting with the development of some software for our own publishing house. And what we wanted to do was recognize, that the digital environment is a native environment. It is not print. And when we looked at all the different publishing tools for presenting, visually based media in digital, we recognized that more often than not, what those tools sought to do was effectively replicate a print experience. And when you look at sort of the history of web publishing, it makes perfect sense because very, very quickly things began to take off, and all we knew as far as distribution of content was print previously. So inevitably, a huge amount of momentum just set off over the course of 20, 30 years or so in creating print experiences on the screen as, quote, successful digital publishing. And we thought, no, this is broken. This is a native environment. I don't want a glorified page turn experience. I don't want a PDF that's static. I want something that's dynamic. I want something that's immersive. And so we began to sort of deconstruct the design process that we experienced great success with in print media. And what we found is that overwhelmingly, the presentation of the highest value visual content in the world, fine art, capital F, capital A, is one that is the experience of that happens within a very refined, controlled, designed environment. You look at the museum space or a beautiful gallery space, or even a finely produced coffee table book. And the design effectively seeks to edit out the distraction and the noise of the surrounding environment of our lives so that we can truly encounter this aesthetic object and then the message imbued therein and have that goosebump moment, that visceral, emotive moment. So we looked at all these different publishing platforms on the web, and we recognized that none of them were focused on this kind of refined, bespoke approach to delivering and experiencing visual media. So we got together with some developers we knew and some designers, and we built this very primitive publishing platform that basically said, forget about the way that publishers think about monetizing content with, the ad well, the banner ad, the display ad, the subscription dialog box. Forget about all these, interruptions, and let's just put a stake in the ground and suggest that the most important thing is a profound experience of high-quality visual content, and let's see what happens. Let's see what kind of value is created. Let's see what follows, because no one's really doing that. And so we took this approach to publishing that really put the visual media first, that allowed for the seamless presentation of photographs and video and audio and text, very sort of subtle, elegant social integration so that one could share the content that they were resonating with, but weren't sort of being forced into doing so. We're not distracted by the social sharing icons, and we started publishing initially specific to iPad within the newsstand, and it totally worked. People were sort of floored by what we were doing, and we originally introduced that as Daylight Digital, and it was an iOS newsstand app, and we would present a new digital publication, rich media publication each month. I got great press coverage, TechCrunch, Recode, Lead Stories when we launched, and we started getting a lot of inbound interest from other publishers as well as brands and agencies saying, hey, what platform are you guys using for this? It's awesome. We'd love to get an intro. And we said, oh, well, it's actually our own tool. And then they asked if they could, license it from us. And we said, oh, we wish, but, we can hardly make sense at the back end. There's there's no interface. And it was kind of amazing that these beautiful, rich visual presentations that were so elegant and well designed were actually being produced through this terrible interfaceless piece of software that we had built. But those touch points added up, and we really saw the sort of the rise of storytelling. We saw this huge sort of acceptance within the brand and product marketing space, as well as consumer audiences for high quality narrative presentation, more visual media. So we thought, we're onto something here. And so we joined forces with some really phenomenal, seasoned, software entrepreneurs, turned investors, some great, designers, developers, and we built a team and pulled together some seed funding, and began developing this as a cloud platform that would allow others to experience the value creation that we were. And we just went full bore into that, and that's been the story of the last 2 or 3 years of my life. And now we're really proud to have the platform live, and we're supporting the work of great publishers and agencies and brands in producing delightful content experiences for their audiences across all devices. It's all responsively designed, and the tool is exceedingly simple to use. That was another big problem that we were trying to solve internally. Understanding that often the production people that have the message, that have the story that needs to go live to an audience, they're not highly sophisticated developers or designers. And so a lot of the kind of friction that we experienced as a publisher, that existed between a great story going live for an audience to engage with, were the developer and designer inputs that needed to, painstakingly take place before it was, a story that existed in a format that we could stand behind and that delighted readers. And so a lot of our software was really designed to eliminate our internal need for developers and designers, and create a consumer-friendly interface, so to speak, for the production team, despite the fact that this is an enterprise cloud platform. And we found that that's true for most brands, for most agencies, for most publishers. So we're really loving what we're doing, and so far I think the audiences of the resulting stories are loving it too.
Well, Taj, let's take a quick look. Let's go to fabl.co, fabl.co. I've got it pulled up right here. Is there a particular story on there that is worth quickly walking through?
Yeah, let's see. I could. Let's pull up this one. The Best of Cleveland. This was a collaboration that we did with Content Marketing Institute around the CMW Content Marketing World Conference last year.
Which is coming up this year. Well, this next month in September.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
We just had Joe Polizzi on the show, so he'll be happy that you're talking about this. You just go to fabl.co, and on your landing page there, you can click on the Best of Cleveland. So in a minute or so, take us quickly through this.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the issue here, as I think is represented by, many conferences, is that a lot of folks come to a city that they don't spend much time in, and they're only there for a few days, and their time between, programmatic events is quite limited. So that was the problem that we were helping solve with CMI. How do we create kind of a curated guide to Cleveland that affords attendees, the opportunity to gather information and make a decision as to where they're going to spend some of their precious free time, either interfacing with other colleagues, conducting business, or just unwinding, getting a break, eating some, non-convention center food, and experiencing a little bit of, the culture of Cleveland.
Their precious free time and precious hard-earned money, I might add there. So
that's right. Good. Exactly. Uh-huh. Yeah. Not everyone has a big expense account, Park. So we effectively, talk about user-generated content and readily accessible imagery that was rights-free. We just had one of our team members, Miranda, who's a phenomenal writer, kind of a marketer and storyteller herself, but formerly trained in PR, pull together, a curated list of places to eat and drink and things to see, and we presented it visually in a way that was overtly optimized for mobile, understanding that likely the dominant, device for accessing this content was something, like an iPhone, right? We're on the go, we're at a conference. So we integrated all of the addresses with Google Maps and set the start point, as the convention center. We ensured, that everything was walking distance. And we set it live, and folks loved it. And it's very beautiful. It's kind of fun to navigate. The Fabl platform very simply supports this parallax effect, so you kind of have that idea of depth, of layering. And despite there being a fair amount of text information, as you navigate this content, it really does feel like a visual experience. And you get a quick glimpse into these different places, and one image communicates something that you can very quickly use to make an informed decision. So it was very practical and very successful, but a great little example of a simple kind of event microsite, if you will, powered by the Fabl platform that was used for multiple purposes, both branding for CMW and Fabl, as well as a great user guide tutorial to Cleveland when you're in town for 72 hours.
Yeah, a lot of utility in it, and the user actually gets involved in the story themselves through being able to share. Can they actually comment on this platform as well? Yes and no. We are not a content destination. When you look at like Medium.com, for instance, Ev Williams is he's a social media guy, and so that's what Medium.com is. It's a social media network that's built around stories that are text focused, but it's all about that engagement, that interaction happening on Medium's platform as a destination. We're sort of, I guess, destination agnostic, if you will. Our platform publishes, into the website, so to speak, of the brand that's leveraging our technology. So they can kind of customize how and where the content that's powered by Fabl goes live, and it may in fact incorporate some kind of user commenting. So it's not to say that that you can't do that. We're not too focused on that social media behavior within the story context. We're much more focused on supporting that within the social media context. So we provide social sharing capabilities for effectively all of the media assets that comprise a Fabl story, and once shared into social, of course, they function as social content there. So not only is it a phenomenal, process by which stories can be promoted and readers can, engage with and be introduced to the mid-form and the long-form visual storytelling that, a Fabl brand client is engaged in, through that social discovery, but they can in fact, comment and repost and engage in social dialogue within the social environment from branded imagery that was actually derived from a Fabl-powered story. So we're really interested in this kind of reciprocal relationship between social content and the mid-form and the long-form storytelling content. And we like to talk internally, a term that we often use for social content is potato chip content. It's really tasty, but it has low caloric value. And the full blown Fabl powered story, or it doesn't even need to be powered by our platform, but beautifully designed visual media, rich. Long form story, that's the meal, right? That's the sandwich. And yeah, you want some chips to go along with that, some salt and some crunch and a little fat, makes the sandwich taste better. But really the nourishment comes from that meal. And so we really are sensitive to the delicate balance and the nuanced relationship between social content, which does leave you hungry and isn't necessarily that great for you, but is really important, and the actual narrative, the actual storytelling. Well, Taj, it seemed like a really amazing platform and another arrow that brands can put in their storytelling quiver. So I really appreciate you coming on the show today and sharing about Fabl and your fascinating background in visual storytelling. Where can people learn more about you, your work in this particular platform?
Yeah, well, I mean, the best resource is certainly the Fabl website. Like you said, it's fabl.co, Fabl.co. the one thing I'll say to kind of wrap things up is that Fabl truly is a platform. I mean, I think that term is so ubiquitously thrown around in the software space today. It often is not accurately used. Fabl is absolutely a platform in that, entire content verticals or brand initiatives can be run off of the platform, or, single lead gen landing pages for B2B marketers can be powered by the platform for a much better, mobile and responsive experience. So as a result, our homepage is somewhat not obscure, but it's purposefully holding back information because we don't want a new prospect to think that it's just one thing. So much of what you'll find on the website is actually just pointing you toward signing up for a demo, and we do demos all day, and we'd love to show anyone who's interested the technology, walk them through it, and help them uncover how they might leverage it for their own growth and value creation. But open to conversation. So really, I'd say just reach out on the website, and we'd be happy to have a chat.
All right. Well, thanks so much for being here with us today. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks, Park. Yeah, I've been a fan of your show for a while, so it's really great to chat with you.
Well, you've given me some tips, too, that now I can run around and practice with my own street photography, so I appreciate that.
Well, don't forget to send me that image. I see it in my mind, so I'd like to take a peek.
Well, I hope it doesn't let you down now after I've built it up.
No, I'm sure it won't. Thanks, man.
Yeah, you bet. And I'd like to thank all of you for listening to another edition of Business of Story. We appreciate you being here and would love to know what you think of the show. So feel free to jump over to iTunes, give us a rating, give us a comment. And if you've got someone you think would be good for the show or a subject matter that you would like for me to cover, feel free to send me a note at park@businessofstory.com. And of course, at businessofstory.com, we have a ton of different storytelling tools that you can use, the download. We have free tools. We have a free online version that you can work story on yourself. And we have taken our DIY guide, which has been so successful. A lot of people have been downloading it, and we've got it now new and improved, where we heard you. You said you've got the book, but you wanted to be able to actually fill it out right inside the PDF. So now we've created the DIY brand story strategy workbook for you, all interactive, including a video tutorial guide inside the book. So feel free to download that again at businessofstory.com. And we look forward to having you back again next week, when we will have another amazing story artist like Taj here at Business of Story. And until then, have a wonderful life.
Thanks for tuning in to the Business of Story. Don't forget there are terrific free storytelling resources for you at thebusinessofstory.com, where you'll also find the complete show archive. The Business of Story is sponsored by Emma and by Convince and Convert, and is produced by Convince and Convert Media. Find more great shows like The Business of Story at marketingpodcasts.com, the first search engine for marketing podcasts. Podcast imaging by AudioBag.com.